Hello, and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout-outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else comes to mind during the course of our conversation. I'm Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. All right, so joining me today is one of my more recent Twitter friends. His name is Sean Moon, and Sean, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into craft beer, and what you do when you're not talking about craft beer.
Sure, Rob. It's really nice to be here. Thanks very much for the invite. My background is basically in journalism and marketing, primarily in the food industry, and I was the managing editor of the Canadian Restaurant and Food Service News for the last 8 years before I retired about 3 or 4 years ago. And covering the food and beverage sector within Canada in particular, and specifically with the Restaurants Canada Association, I got to discover a lot of the ins and outs of various aspects of the industry. And I had given up alcohol back in about 2005 due to some health conditions. And when the doctor said, well, it would probably be the best for your heart if you if you decided to forego alcohol and cigarettes altogether. So that seemed like a reasonable request to me. And my biggest regret was, am I going to be able to find anything that I truly enjoy drinking at social occasions or, out to dinner, that kind of thing, and without feeling ostracized? And I find back, 15 years ago, there certainly wasn't the opportunities and the varieties of non-alcoholic beer. And I forgot completely about beer. I thought, okay, it's just not part of my life anymore. And having a background in health and nutrition and the food industry, I thought, I'm kind of surprised that there's not more of an option out there for people beyond the traditional O'Doul's or Sharps or whatever, some of the grocery store brands, PC Red or Blonde, that they had. And I think Molson had one that wasn't particularly enjoyable, XL. And these are all dreadful things that I think most regular beer drinkers have tried at some point and were sorely disappointed and thought this is ridiculous. And so I just left it alone for a while. Then I was, back in the days when I was still able to enjoy alcohol, I enjoyed many different types of craft beer. And it hadn't really come to the forefront in Canada quite as much as it certainly is now, with so many microbreweries and craft beer varieties popping up, different styles available. And about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was at a Restaurants Canada show in Toronto, which is the big trade show every year that the Restaurant Association holds. And they have a whole pavilion or section of beverage manufacturers and providers there. And I was just walking the floor, as I usually do, for taking a break from working in our booth for the magazine. And I came upon a gentleman by the name of Ted Fleming, and who was presenting his product, the Partake beers. And Partake has now become kind of a famous non-alcoholic beer in Canada. It's probably the one that's most widely available other than the big macro brews like Budweiser Zero and Heineken Zero. And Ted and I got into a conversation, and at this time, I think I'd maybe had some O'Doul's and Sharps over the years, and hadn't had an opportunity to try anything as exotic as a pale ale or an IPA. And he had two on the table there to be sampled. And he was telling me about his upcoming gig that he was going to have on Dragon's Den. And he was presenting this product, hoping to score some financial backing to make his product more widely available. And, so I gave a couple of sips, and to be honest, I really didn't know what to think. I thought he was fooling me. I said, you're telling me this is non-alcoholic, zero. And he said, well, it's the standard 0.5%, which in North America and most of Europe, that's classified as a non-alcoholic beer. We can get into the nitty gritty of that later, but for most part, that falls easily under the auspices. Quite frankly, a ripe banana has more alcohol than 0.5%. And he said, yeah, absolutely, 100%, this is non-alcoholic beer. And I walked away just thinking, wow, I missed out on something. And I thought, well, maybe I'm not going to be relegated to Diet Coke and soda water, when we go to traveling or these, social occasions. So that started my experience with craft beer in the non-alcoholic beer sector. And I wasn't in search of it necessarily. It was a lucky chance. And at the time, really Partake was the only game in town. And it wasn't widely available. I got talking to Ted a little bit, and he was telling me that he was hoping to get into the LCBO stores in Ontario, the liquor stores run by the government for those who are outside the jurisdiction. And he said it's just easier to deal with one entity rather than the various grocery store chains and the various brokers and suppliers. And he said, so hopefully if I can get in there, and that's where his products were initially available, which seems kind of counterintuitive when a lot of people who do turn to non-alcoholic beers are either in recovery or really don't want to go into a liquor store or trying to avoid that kind of thing. The only place you can get it is the liquor store, and I'm comfortable with that. So I was able to get some. And he also had a pretty good online presence. He had been selling various non-alcoholic beers from around the world for a few years before he decided to go out on his own and brew some due to his own health conditions. And I think ultimately his goal is like what a lot of the other non-alcoholic craft brewers are. I'm going to use the term NA. It doesn't mean Narcotics Anonymous. It means non-alcoholic. And a lot of them have the same goal, and that is basically to create craft beer, great tasting craft beer that just happens to not have any alcohol in it. And I think once that mindset changed for a lot of people, the number of producers and breweries creating these excellent products, which are every bit as good as the alcoholic varieties, that really started to blossom in North America. And I've seen so much growth over the last 5 or 6 years, particularly in the US. It's long been a major factor in Europe. Non-alcoholic beer has been widely accepted for years because of the very strict drinking and driving laws over there. It's part of the culture. You go out for work to a cafe or a pub. You have a couple of beers before you even go home for dinner. And a lot of people, the focus isn't on getting drunk or inebriated in any way. The focus is on enjoying your friends and your family and being out and socializing with your workmates and having a delicious beer. So it's always been, for the past 10 or 15 years, it's been pretty common in the UK and in Europe, Spain, Italy, France, to be able to get a good non-alcoholic beer. And that is still just beginning over here in North America. But it's growing significantly every year. And so I got more and more involved, even though I'm now retired from the journalistic world. I got more involved mainly as a fan and as a consumer. And I started looking into the industry a little bit more and saying, wow, there are some really, some, sorry to use the pun, but some untapped opportunities here that we can really be, help grow a whole segment in North America that so many people either have a misconception of or just don't know anything about it. And I think even for regular beer drinkers, they'll be pleasantly surprised to what's actually out there now in terms of flavor and quality. And it's never going to taste the same as an alcoholic beer. Let's be honest about that. It doesn't have alcohol in it. So it's broccoli and apples are both plants, but they're very different things, and that you can't really compare them. So when I'm looking at a craft beer from a non-alcoholic perspective, I'm not comparing it to what somebody else who's putting a full what I'll call leaded or a high test version out. I'm not going to compare those. I'm going to compare it to another IPA that's also non-alcoholic, or I'll compare it to some of the macros or things like that. That's a bit about my background. I predominantly worked in journalism and marketing in the food sector, and just began to learn a lot about craft beer, particularly as it applied to the non-alcoholic sector.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. So for those who haven't picked up on it, today's topic is non-alcoholic beers,
Yes, sure.
you know, I mean, they still have the word beer in it, so I'm going to talk about it. so, yeah. So for people who aren't aware, non-alcoholic beers in North America have come quite a long ways from, where they used to be when all you had was, like Sharps and O'Doul's, which were garbage. I mean, let's not try and gussy it up at all. Though they were and probably still are garbage. I mean, they were shoved out into the market and they weren't done very well.
Right.
And you know, they were just trying to appease some people. The offerings that are out there today, like ones from Partake and from the brewery that I'll be having a beer from today, which is called Athletic Brewing, which is out of Stratford, Connecticut. They make good stuff. I mean, yes, you are correct. It's not the same as an alcoholic beer, and it'll never be the same as an alcoholic beer. But you know, it's not bad stuff at all. And on that note, I'm going to open mine. So I am having Athletic Brewing Company's All Out Stout. So it's pretty good. I bought a 6-pack of this, and I bought a 6-pack of their Golden Ale, and I've had one of each so far prior to the show. And I have to say, it's not bad. I mean, I wouldn't refuse it if somebody handed it to me at a party. And that's pretty much saying that if I'll drink it, then it must be pretty damn good.
Yeah, and you're quite a fan of some of the darker, the imperial stouts and the porters and things with a bit of heft to them. And you know, that's why I value your opinion when it comes to this kind of thing, especially with the stout. I was glad when you let me know that you were going to be trying that product. And by the way, I don't represent any particular brewery. I'm just a fan. I try to, you know, spread my wings, so to speak, and try them all. And all the new ones that come along, and I will touch on a couple today, time permitting, you know, just for the different styles. So it's nice to get a professional's opinion on how they see. Yeah, you know, I can see how, you know, when you're comparing a non-alcoholic stout to a full strength stout, and I don't even know if some of the brewers are even calling them stouts, the non-alcoholic ones. They're tend to be call them dark or you know, a dark ale or something. They're, for all intents and purposes, with their flavor profile, they're stouts. They don't have the viscosity and the mouthfeel and the really nice meaty texture to them that that a traditional stout would have. Now, I'm hearing some pretty incredible things about the new Guinness Zero coming over probably next summer to North America, at least to the U.S. and likely Canada. And I'm hearing some things from over the water that it's pretty bang on. So I'm interested to see what you're having, Rob. I'm going to be featuring another Athletic beer, and this is the Run Wild IPA. I personally think this is closer to a pale ale from my taste profile. It's not crazy hoppy. It's not as citrusy as, say, a hazy IPA, but it has a very nice you know, a nice amount of hops in it, and as well as some decent malt. So we'll see what you think.
Yeah, it's probably a bit closer to like a traditional English IPA recipe as opposed to like a West Coast or an East Coast IPA. Yeah. So just off the top, I mean, it smells like a stout. It's got that kind of roasty coffee. It's got a little bit of chocolate to it, but it's not like most stouts where you get a big nose full of chocolate with a little bit of roasty coffee. This is kind of like the opposite. This one, it's more like the roasted coffee notes are what predominant in the aroma. It's got a slight sweet smell to it, and that's just because, I mean, it's malt tea, so of course it's gonna have that kind of sweet smell to it.
Absolutely.
It is thin, and that's to be expected because it doesn't have, you know, it's never going to have the same body that even like a Guinness or anything like that, like a lighter dry stout. But it is good. I mean, it's got a roasty flavor to it. It's not. I wouldn't say the flavor is necessarily chocolatey like it is for a lot of stouts, but it is roasty. So you get that depth of character there. You get the toasted and the chocolate style malts that are in there. So you get that that dark. I mean, for lack of a better word, it is kind of like a coffee flavor to it, but it's not like hit you in the mouth coffee stout. It's just,
Right.
oh yeah, this is a roasted malt that's in here, and roasted barleys that are in here. There is a slight bit of chocolate, but like I said, just like the aroma, it takes a backseat to the roasty flavors in it, and it is thin. It finishes quickly and has a slight lingering aftertaste to it, which is not unpleasant. And it's one of those that kind of coats your mouth because it's a stout style, so it makes you want to drink more.
Yeah, and I think you'll find, if you're at a social occasion or at a party or anything like that, and if that's what you're going for at a party, I don't know a lot of people that drink stouts at a party, especially if you're going to be there for a long time. But if you're going to be consuming several of them, and even if you're alternating between high test and NA beers, it's something that you can have a few and not be ridiculously full on, and you're still going to be able to enjoy a second or third one without feeling bloated.
Right. Well, and that's a big thing that's completely different than the standard stout because it is so much thinner.
Right.
You don't get that. You don't get that. Oh my God! I just drank a loaf of bread feeling like you do with a lot of stouts. It's a fairly low carbonation on this one too. So it's not like your typical beers. The head came up quick and dissipated fast, but that's probably because one, there's no alcohol left in here to help give it the extra oomph, and
Right.
two, it might be whatever yeast they use when they actually make the beer. It might just be one that doesn't promote head retention, or it might be something to do with the process of removing the alcohol that also removes whatever it is that gives your typical stout that head retention. Because usually on a stout you'll have a good foamy head that'll stick around for a little bit, but I mean this is pretty much gone already.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it plays into the carbonation and how they're actually doing that, where they're doing it, at what part of the process. Excuse me, and it depends on how they're actually achieving the non-alcohol or de-alcoholized version, because there's a couple of methods, as I understand. I'm not a brewer, but just having learned a little bit about it, that you either you brew it to full strength and then you remove the alcohol, or you arrest the process before it gets to making the actual alcohol and the fermentation, which both cases affect the flavor of whatever
Right.
beer it is. And in stouts in particular, I think that is, you're looking at something like a Guinness where that head retention stays there forever. You could walk on it. And
Right.
you're just not going to find that with any of the stouts that I've had from the NA universe. However, that's not to say that some of them aren't very good. There's I think Abrams makes a peanut butter stout that's quite amazing. And a couple of the other ones in the U.S. that aren't easily available up here. You can get them going through certain online sites that will ship up to Canada, but you got to mortgage your house just to get them here.
Right.
The shipping is shipping, and that's we live in the current pandemic situation where so much is being sent online and shipped that we're getting used to that, I think. But yeah, when I hear people talk about some of the flavor profiles, I can't imagine that it's only been 5 or 6 years since that kind of availability has been occurring. For old duels and some of the macros that have been around for a while, beer flavored soda pop wasn't cutting it, and certainly for
Right.
people who enjoyed craft beer when they were, and maybe still do. I belong to several groups on social media and Facebook and whatnot that are focused on NA beer, and I would say by and large, those groups are populated probably about 60% of the people are in what I would call recovery, so former drinkers who have given up alcohol for good. But that leaves a pretty significant portion of the market who are there for other reasons. Either they currently consume both regular beer and non-alcoholic, or they, they just want to find a way to either reduce how much they're drinking, or they've got designated driver duties, or they don't want to imbibe as much during the week, or whatever it is. Everybody's got their own reasons for wanting to try it. And that's what's great about it, is that those options are now there for people who still want that flavor, the full flavor
Right.
of a craft beer, without the wateriness and the overly sweet, which I found O'Doul's, and when they get warm, they're just awful. I'd rather not drink them. They always have to
most
be
definitely.
now with the stouts and the darker ones, they're fine left for a little bit to get around 45 degrees. They're absolutely, it opens up the flavor a little bit, just like they would with a traditional stout.
Yep.
But some of them have to be so painfully cold just to get them down that you're sitting in the sun drinking one of these. The last thing you want to do is watch it get warm and you're beside your beach chair. The IPA that I have is probably one of Athletic's biggest sellers. It was one of the first ones that they brought into Canada when they opened up their warehouse in Toronto and made their products available online to Canadian consumers. As far as I'm aware, they're still working on getting retail distribution, but I think they're quite happy in controlling the amount of flow they have coming into Canada. I know that they have had some challenges in the past with the U.S. and keeping up with demand for their products. I mean, they are the biggest and probably the fastest growing craft brewery in the United States of any type in the United States right now. And that is primarily, they come up with sessions and limited editions and all kinds of stuff every week. I see the people that are in the US who are subscribers to their monthly beer package that are getting all these incredible beers that are only available, they're sold out literally in a day. And there's only, 100 cases or 50 cases or whatever they're sold. So, here's a company that's managed to do very well in Canada now with only, I think they've got 5 varieties here. So this is one, and as you can see from the color, the lighting's not the best in here, but it's more of a pale ale type of color. It's not a hazy. You can see through it. It's not any IPA, and it doesn't have those really overbearing citrusy qualities, or even any of the West Coast hops that the Citra hops and some of the other ones that you would get. This is a gently hopped beer. It's very approachable for somebody who isn't a hophead and who isn't normally a fan of IPAs. It's very, friendly that way. There's a little bit of legs on the glass. It's not the same as wine or having the alcohol in it.
Right.
And I find with non-alcoholic IPAs, they probably taste the closest to the real deal, only because they have that bit of flavor that masks the fact that there's no alcohol in it. So they have the other addition of the hops, or some of the darker beers have a stronger malt. The ambers are particularly good. I think they do a good job with those. Non-alcoholic beer in general comes across to me as being sweeter than a regular beer, and I think that's because there's no alcohol in it. So that alcohol tends to temper the sweetness of most of beers in the regular world. But this one, I drink it and I don't get any kind of overt sweetness to it. This is I would call it dry almost. Some of the dry beers, and it's got just the right amount of hops to say I'm drinking something that's craft. It's not a mainstream macro brew. I don't know that I could drink 6 of them, just because there's enough hops there that you're going to get overly bitter after a while, and you're probably going to switch to one of the other ones that you've got.
Yeah, of the 2 that I've got, the Stout and the Golden Ale, I actually think the Golden Ale is probably the better of the 2 beers in terms of overall flavor profile. It comes closer to matching what you would expect like a blonde ale or something like that in the craft world to taste like, and it has the advantage that the beer that it is, the Golden Ale or the blonde ale style, is a pretty thin bodied beer to begin with. So there's not a whole lot to be lost, so you won't notice as big a difference. Whereas with a stout, you're expecting a stout to have that kind of round and soft mouthfeel to it. And this is thin and I don't want to say it's a sharp mouthfeel, but it's thin and it dissipates so quickly that it, you're like, was that really a stout?
Yeah. It's stoutish.
Yes.
I mean and I think that's pretty typical of most of the NA stouts that I've had. Partake has one as well. And I think Partake's nailed the flavor, quite frankly. It's still thin. Le Bac Ale is a small brewery in Quebec, which has several outstanding beers. And the first one of theirs that I tried is called Trou Noir, which means black hole. And which is a great name for a stout, by the way. I think that's excellent. And their Trou Noir stout I had in Montreal in a pub, and I thought honestly that they brought me a regular full strength stout, and I couldn't believe it. My buddy who drinks regular craft beer, he tasted it and he said, "Yeah, man, that tastes like a regular stout." And he loves stouts, and he said that he goes, "I would drink that in a heartbeat, no problem." And so if you're looking for some options when you're, you got to keep a clear head, or you're driving, or lunchtime, and you don't want you want to have a beer or two at lunch, and you don't want to be sleepy when you get back to work. It's a nice option to have. So I don't know. I was always interested in, as I learned about this industry, and it's kind of one of the reasons that I thought, when seeing some of your tweets and your posts on Twitter, I thought, boy, I wonder if this craft beer market, if a lot of the regular craft beer drinkers are even, aware of just how much this is growing in particular in North America. So I just thought it might be fun to just kind of touch on what's driving this right now. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's being driven by craft beer fans. I think it's being driven from several other areas who also happen to enjoy craft beer. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for craft beer drinkers and others to kind of experience some of these great new beers. And there's breweries popping up every couple of months. I see another one. I just had a great conversation today with a gentleman named Steve Abrams from, he originally was one of the founders of Mill Street Brewery. Okay. They focused on organic beers, and they still make some excellent beers. Well, Steve's now involved with a venture and is one of the founding people involved with Harmon's, what they call craft beer. And one of theirs is a lunchbox lagered ale. No, there's a mouthful, but that's what it is. And lagering obviously is a process that they do to certain beers, and it is extremely enjoyable. And they're looking to expand their market based on the premises. Hey, listen, all we want to do is make good beer. The fact that it's non-alcoholic is a bonus for those who want that. And they've managed to. They're starting very slowly, and they're trying to control, the kind of momentum, because with supply chain issues right now and all that kind of stuff. Right. And they're doing some unique things, but they're also not the only ones right now. And Steve and I had a great conversation about what's happening with the market in North America, and where things are really popping. Quebec has several excellent breweries that they actually probably do both non-alcoholic and alcoholic beers, but they're really expanding into this sector. And Sober Carpenter's one. Their products are available in the Metro grocery chain. They're available at the beer stores in Ontario. They have several varieties. They have an Irish Red. They have IPA. They've got a white. They've got a session organic IPA. So they've got several varieties that are easily available. The price point, they're usually around $3 for a tall boy, which is comparable to what an alcoholic beer is going to be for, a decent quality. And keeping in mind that the process is actually more expensive to make a non-alcoholic beer than it is a regular beer. And that surprises a lot of people. Well, I'm not getting the booze. Why is it more money, or why is it more expensive for me to buy non-alcoholic beer? And I think as soon as you explain the fact that, well, we have to go through vacuum distillation and all this kind of stuff to get there, your product's going to be more expensive to get to market. Out west, Alberta, BC have some excellent microbreweries. At a Village Brewery in I think they're based in Calgary. They have a couple of varieties. They have a Kolsch, or there's an no, that's not Village. There's another one in Alberta. They have a Hellas. They have a Kolsch. They have all these different ones. There's Red Racer in BC. They make a really a great IPA called Street Legal. Some of these are great names too. I mean, they're coming up with some really creative branding on these products, and I think in Canada this is still a relatively small market, but it's projected to really boom. One of my former colleagues, when I was managing the magazine, is named Roger Mittag, and Roger.
I know Roger.
You know Roger, I'm sure you do, and he runs the Prud'homme beer certification, which I'm sure if you've been through, then you know Roger. And Roger and I had a great meeting last summer where I was talking about this whole sector, and he was just saying that it's not even begun to start. The explosion is still on the horizon for Canada and mainly for the U.S. It's still a niche market. When you look at what's happened in Europe, and it's over 20%, probably as high as 25% of the regular full beer market in Europe, there's a long way to go in North America. And I think there's opportunities for people who are great brewers who want to try brewing some of these, or for full strength brewers who want to expand their horizons a little bit and dip their toes in.
I think what's going to have to happen, though, is there's going to have to be a shift in the mindset for North Americans. I've been over to the UK and Europe, and the mindset for drinking is completely different. You go out after work, you have 1 or 2, 3 beers tops, then you go home.
Right.
In the States, most people go out to the bar to get blessed. They just have so many beers, so there's a big shift. I think it's going to have to happen in North America. We're starting to see that because a lot of people, the thing that's driving it that I've seen is a lot of people who are athletes. They want to drink their beer, but they can't have the consequences that standard beers bring, which is the increased calories or the bloating or the alcohol that's going to deter from their performance.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a big thing.
Sorry about that.
It happens.
Should have put that on silent. Anyway, there we go. Absolutely. And there's a huge cultural difference between what's happening in Europe and North America. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's, some of the other drivers of this market are going to kind of pick up that momentum and probably help sustain this current. It's really a boom. If there's a lot of players getting involved, there tends to be something there, and including the number of ads that are being run in the U.S. by Athletic and Heineken and some of the bigger players is any indication. I think it's starting to become more widely accepted. First of all, there's always been a negative perception of non-alcoholic beers. What's the point, right? What's the point? I've always believed that says more about your own drinking habits than it does about the point of, it's something to drink, isn't it? Is that one of my British friends? It's something to drink, isn't it? It's absolutely. I don't always want to drink Diet Coke when I'm out at a restaurant and having a nice meal. I'd like something I could pair with whatever I'm having. And why not be able to pair that with that IPA with some spicy tacos or whatever it is. So I think there's some of that happening. But there's other demographic drivers that don't get talked about very much. And, as any anti-drunk driving laws and stricter laws may or may not happen, that comes with time. They're a lot more strict in places like Ireland and other European countries that kind of force people to take it easy when they go out to the pub after work and go home. They don't want to be getting in their car. So over in North America, I think one of the biggest drivers is actually millennials. Now, whether or not they are beer drinkers is a whole other discussion. But I think in general, they seem to be driven by that health halo. And, a lot of there's a lot more focus on being healthy and not, they in general aren't as big a consumers of alcohol.
Right.
And or of any of what I used to called the other sins, like gambling and casinos. Any casino operator in Canada will tell you that they're having a hard time getting bums at the tables, into those chairs because the millennials aren't going. And so a lot of the market is being driven for whatever beer drinkers there are in that market. Now, I think a lot of this is tending to go to non-alcoholic cocktails. And some of the seltzer type drinks and
Yep.
More some of the mocktail areas, but you also have a rapidly aging baby boomer sector in North America in particular that are retiring. I'm one of them. I understand that. People who have been maybe enjoying beer pretty heavily for 40 years or 35 years and now it's a little harder on the body than it used to be. And so
Right.
they're either getting medical recommendations to say, it's time to cut back a bit or give it up altogether. And having these options is certainly sending some of the people here. Some of the recovery groups, if that's a certain percentage of the market, are people in recovery, and it makes sense. People want to have something to drink other than alcohol. Some of the recovery groups, we all know the granddaddy of them, they frown upon non-alcoholic beer, and that's up to somebody to decide if it's right for them or not. And working with their sponsor or their program is again, that's the discussion you have with your group. But I think in general, a lot of people are more open-minded about it, knowing that it is a healthy option. And you mentioned the athletic thing. That's probably why they named the brewery Athletic Brewing Company. They know that there's
Right.
an athlete. They sponsor a ton of athletes. And Erdinger over in Germany sponsors the German Olympic team. No, they make both full strength and non-alcoholic beer, but they also use non-alcoholic beer in their training and their recovery programs. Athletic recovery, after marathoning and whatever shot putting they're doing, they're using non-alcoholic beer because, let's face it, it's a healthy drink without the side effects of the alcohol. And there's a lot of benefits to things like hops and the bioflavonoids and all these great nutritional terms that are still in a non-alcoholic beer, just like there are in full strength beer. So, you see all these other things. There's cultural and ethnic drivers, certain religious groups that don't consume alcohol. There are a lot of, people from the Middle East or whatever that are coming to Canada and North America and, aren't consuming alcohol, but they're okay consuming non-alcoholic beer. I found out that Saudi Arabia and Morocco and some of the Middle Eastern countries have a huge non-alcoholic beer market because 99% of the people that live there don't drink, and the alcohol is for the tourists or the government people that are working there, and so there are all these other considerations that I think can help drive the market. They won't be the only ones, and I think that's going to be fluid as well. That's going to change over the next few years as the options get better and better.
Yeah. I think you're right, and I think I think you're 100% correct that the younger generations aren't drinking as much because they are more focused on their health, but they still want to have things that taste better than Coke and Pepsi to drink. So
right.
Having the option for mocktails or having the option for non-alcoholic beer is going to, you're going to see it's going to rise. And, there, like you were saying, there's a lot of cultures where alcohol isn't a big thing. I think it was Iceland didn't actually have beer, didn't have beer as a legal thing until like 1989 or something like that.
Yeah. I was just there a few years ago. Yeah, absolutely. It's just an accepted thing now. It's only recently accepted that it's even legal. And they had some excellent non-alcoholic beers there, which, again, the price of alcohol in Iceland is also prohibitive. So that is, that's one of the things that turns people, sends people maybe more to non-alcoholic beers. It's just darn expensive to drink there. That's why everybody loads up at the airport before they go into hotel. Um,
Yeah, I go ahead.
I was just going to say that, let's finish your thought, because then I want to just touch on where I can see some actual opportunities for growing the market.
Sure. I was saying, I'd kind of like to see a revolution of things going back to the way they were around the Prohibition times, where you had small beers and you had non-alcoholic beers and tonics and things like that. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit, because you always have, like, all these places have session ales, which are the low alcohol beers. They're 3 to 4%. So
Right.
I mean, a small beer back in the Prohibition days or pre-Prohibition days was like 2.5 to 3%. And we're seeing, at least I've seen in the circles of people I hang out with in the summertime, there's a whole lot of Radlers and there's a whole lot of Shandies being consumed, which are low alcohol. They're 2 to 3%. So,
Right.
I think overall, I read a report, was it a year or two ago, that the overall alcohol consumption worldwide is down like 18 or 19%, from what it was just 10 years ago. So I think we're seeing this general trend, and I don't mind it. Yes, I'm a huge fan of big ABV beers, but I'm more of a fan of flavor. So if
Right.
you can, if you can give me a beer that has 2 or 3% alcohol and still has a fantastic flavor, I will literally drink it all day long.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the fact that some of these businesses and these breweries are creating enough quality beers that people like yourself or others who are focused on flavor and not on the alcohol content are finding that there's a lot more to enjoy here than they ever imagined. And again, it's the biggest challenges to me that I've seen, and in talking with experts like Roger, have been mainly in distribution and getting those distribution channels fully stocked and getting product onto shelves and in whatever locations. They're far more accessible in the US, where they have things like Total Wine and some of the chains of alcohol but they have massive sections now devoted to non-alcoholic beer. You go in there and they've got a whole aisle devoted to it. And, if you're lucky, if you're in Loblaws, they tend to have the biggest selection that I've seen in grocery stores in Ontario. They have a lot of varieties. They have some of the imported Germans, the Erdinger, the Klausthaler, the dry hop. Klausthaler is fantastic, by the way. It's one of my favorites. And I bought, what did I pick up the other day? Oh, the Kronenberg 1664. Now, some of those European ones tend to be a little on the sweeter side. And they're, traditional European style Pilsners or lagers, and they tend to be a little sweeter. And they're very low hopped in comparison. The hops things really seems to be North America, that we're hop crazy over here, particularly with craft beers. And I was never an IPA guy at all when I drank alcohol. And I'm finding I do enjoy them more now, because they tend to feel more like a beer, only because they've got that added dimension of flavor.
Right.
But what I'm seeing in the U.S. is, the number of varieties. Every time I turn around, there's a new Irish Red out, or Two Roots is a brewery in California that's doing some great things now. Their calorie count tends to be a little bit up there. They're getting a lot of flavor in. Some of them are lower in calories. Some breweries like Partake are notoriously low, like 10 calories for a can of pale ale. That's great if you're watching your carbs, you're diabetic, and you're trying to, you've got to count things like carbs and watch your sugars. Awesome.
Yep.
I've seen the data sheets. I couldn't believe it at first. And I said, hey, can you show me some of your data sheets? Sure, no problem. And, this is the real deal. Some of these companies, I find the average is about 50 to 60 calories for a typical non-alcoholic beer. Some of them are upper crowding around 100. Depending on what the variety is. And some of the stouts might be a little bit higher, but Partake Stout, I think, is only 35 or 40 calories. Still pretty low for some flavor. It's not the big, thick,
Right.
The big, thick mouthful of flavor you're getting from a Guinness or Smithwick's or something. You're just not going to find that in a non-alcoholic beer. Now, that's just not to say that never, because apparently Guinness is come darn close over, and I can't wait to try it. I think it could be a game changer over here when it comes to that. But some of the other opportunities that I think the breweries can take a look at, and I'm sure they have after speaking with Mr. Abrams from Harmon's today. We talked about things like getting more and more into the widely available into restaurants and food service. Right now, most of the restaurants I go into in Ontario, if you're lucky if you can get O'Doul's, or not O'Doul's, a Heineken Zero or Beck's. Yep. And there isn't an awful lot now. Budweiser Zero, maybe. And I know of a couple of concert venues, Danforth Music Hall and a couple of others in Toronto, that are actually carrying Partake. So, it's getting out there a little bit, but you can go to almost every football stadium in the United States and get Athletic now. Most of the big football stadiums, the baseball, you can go. They've got kiosks set up. You can go and get yourself an Upside Down or a Run Wild at the ball game or at a concert. So I think entertainment and recreation facilities, golf courses. I'm an avid golfer. That's what I do when I'm not doing podcasts and talking about beer and drinking beer. Is I really like to play golf, and I haven't seen any at any of the golf courses. Now, I understand that we're dealing with COVID and everything, and so people are going home after their round. Now they're not sitting around on patios or going into the clubhouse. So that's a little bit different, but it's still going to be great when we can get past all this and we can see some really good quality non-alcoholic beers. Of course, that's going to come hand in hand with getting more varieties on tap. And, I think there's issues with safety for getting non-alcoholic beer in draft, just because of, there's various issues that come up with draft beer. And I think they have to make sure that they can get it working properly. I've never seen any. I know Athletic, if you go to their tap room in Connecticut, you've got 5 or 6 varieties on tap. But again, you're competing with, if they've got 6 handles in a restaurant or a bar, now you're competing with the 6 reps that have been in here from Molson's and whatever the local craft breweries are, and you're trying to get them to convince to take a non-alcoholic beer. I think if they realize that the markup is actually pretty decent and you're making just as much money off them if you're going to push it, and getting servers and restaurant staff to be more fully versed in what's available. And, I think we got some O'Doul's back in the fridge back there somewhere. It's probably stale dated by now, and that's all they have. I mean, even pubs that focus on good quality beer, generally, they might have Erdinger. I think I've seen in a couple of them. And, while it's better than some of the others, it's still not a craft beer. And there's opportunities there. I think there's opportunities if they can provide a way and come up with a way to provide some benefit to the breweries as an association of the owners, much in the way the Craft Beers Association and others things have operated in the past. Again, provided there's there's a benefit to all the parties involved.
Right.
And collaboration between some of the breweries and food service operators. Getting people that make cheese and some of the artisanal foods to pair with non-alcoholic breweries when they're doing food shows or beer festivals or all these kind of things. I think there's some great opportunities for tastings and flights. I see people say, we did a beer flight of non-alcoholic beers in my home. And it's like, well, wow, that's a golden opportunity for me. I'm just screaming at restaurant operators. Come on, guys, pay attention. Pay attention to this, because it's going to happen. And, be part of it. Be part of a great new segment to the beer industry that I think is not going to go away. I don't think it's going to just fall off and die. I don't think it's a fad.
No, I think it's a segment that will grow. I don't know that it's going to grow to the extent that the current craft beer scene is, but it will be part of the current craft beer scene at some point. I think it'll be widely enough accepted that you'll see side by side regular craft beer with non-alcoholic craft beers, and it'll be great, like you said, for people who are the designated driver or people who are just trying to limit their alcohol intake or limit their caloric intake, because that's one of the biggest things for me is I like to drink beer, and I know that every single beer I pick up, that's an extra 300 calories or so that I'm consuming.
Yeah. And as I know that as I got older, it's been 15 or 16 years now since I gave up the alcohol. So it's been easier to maintain or even lose weight. Even if I'm having a couple of beers a day, it's not a fact, I can have 2 partakes and it's 20 calories. That's nothing. That's really nothing. And if I'm, I like to cook, so I'm having a beer when I'm cooking dinner and maybe one with dinner. And I don't worry about those extra carbs or those extra calories because there really aren't any. Some beers are going to, but those are the treats on the weekend. And, I would treat it like a normal, high calorie or high alcohol beer in the past. You can, there's that variety there now, at least. I think some of the resorts, whether in Canada domestically or internationally, my wife and I like to travel, and when we can get back to doing so, safely, some of the big chains like Sandals and some of the all-inclusive chains, they still really haven't gotten on board. The last time I was there, our room category allowed us to kind of pre-order what we wanted in our room fridge. And I said, you can just take out all the local beer. That's fine. We don't drink it, leave the wine there. Maybe my wife will have a glass of wine. But I said, if you have any non-alcoholic beer, great. But, put some in there. And of course I get there and it's loaded up with O'Doul's. And I said, you know what? Let me talk to your food and beverage manager and see if we can get something going, because you can do better than this. Even Heineken's better than this. And actually, I quite enjoy. I think the Heineken in a can of the non-alcoholic, they've done a really good job, and it's quite enjoyable. And I'm going, come on, like Sandals is known for a high end clientele and people that like to enjoy food and wine, and you can do better than this and have this as an option. And sure, you're not going to get a ton of people just going there to your resort chain just to have non-alcoholic beer. But boy, wouldn't it be a nice selling point if you did. So one of the bartenders one time said to me, man, they must love you. It's an all-inclusive chain, right? They must love you here. Oh yeah, why? Because I'm paying full price, just like my wife is, and she's not a big drinker anyway. But just the guy over there drinking 16 rum and cokes is paying the same price I am, and I'm getting the the little tinny O'Doul's that's going to get warm and taste like syrup. So I think they can do better, and I think some of the resorts, whether it's the ski resorts in Banff or Whistler or anything like that, golf clubs, some of the B&Bs and the places out in Quebec, there's lots of opportunity to grow the market. But it's going to take a general perception from the public that this is actually pretty good stuff, and it's pretty cool, and you don't feel weird anymore when you're drinking a non-alcoholic beer. At least I don't. I've been at parties and people have asked to try it. They said, hey, you've got an extra one of those. I'd love to try that. And that's great when you get that kind of word of mouth and people, because I find that's the greatest thing for the consumers is word of mouth, when you can share those products and people go, wow, I never would have known about it if you hadn't been drinking that at the party. And next thing I know, they're buying some. A buddy of mine who we happen to enjoy the same kind of esoteric progressive rock band. We see each other every couple of years at a Montreal big 3-day thing they have for this band. And, he said, yeah, I went and bought some Partake the other day. It's great. And, he's a big craft beer drinker. And he said, I got a big work week and I bought some Stout and some Pale Ale, and these are all excellent. So I think the future's bright. I think there's some good things happening. There's lots of good ones to try in Canada. I'm probably not going to pour all these because we're getting tight on time, but this is Partake's. This is Partake's Pale. Nice. This is their Pale Ale, and it's really nice. It's very similar in color to the IPA that I just had from Athletic, but this was the first one that Partake had in Canada, and they're now going gangbusters in the U.S. They ship. They're for sale in all the chain stores in the U.S. The Total Wine, you can still buy them online, but I bought these in Walmart. So
Yeah.
that, Walmart's got his own supply chain quirks. But now you can get it at Walmart. I never thought I would have seen that 5 years ago. This is their IPA. Their IPA is very hoppy. This is more closely associated with what I would say is your West Coast IPA. It's not a hazy. This definitely has Citra hops and some of the other West Coast hops. And, I look at the ingredients, 4 ingredients: water, barley, hops, and yeast. That's it, man. They're not messing around. There's no maltodextrin in this. There's no, corn syrup. Some of the grocery brands tend to put that kind of stuff in instead of good barley for malts. And this is Harmon's. So this is a new one that is just out. They're into some local stores in Toronto. They're into Big Carrot, which is a health food store. They're going into some stores in Hamilton and some restaurants and whatnot. They've got, this is Lunchbox a lagered ale, and then they've got a Jack Pine pale ale and another one coming out. So they're dealing with some issues when it comes to cardboard, bizarre things happening in the supply chain. And
first it was aluminum, now it's cardboard. Who knows what's going to be next?
Well, they've gone to cardboard rings, their dividers for their shipping, and which is great because they're very eco-friendly and eco-conscious as a company. And so I think they're just trying to iron out some kinks when it comes to, they want to maintain those cardboard biodegradable rings, better for the wildlife, better for the planet, all that kind of stuff. But again, they're not the only ones, and they're like a lot of the breweries. They're trying to create products that people would drink, whether or not they've given up alcohol or whether or not they go back and forth between the two. And creating that good tasting product and quality product is paramount. And I think they got it. They've got that message.
Yeah, and that's going to be the key. It's going to be advertising and actually having something people want to drink. If the flavor isn't there, people won't drink it. And that's going to be the key. And like I said, the two that I've had from Athletic are both good. Like I said, I thought the Golden Ale is a better representation than the Stout. But that, having said that, a Stout's going to be a very hard beer to have as a non-alcoholic beer, just because of the way it's supposed to be in its form. It's supposed to be this heavier mouth, this big heavy mouth feel. It's round and soft, and it's never going to come across that way. But yeah, no, it is good stuff. I haven't had any of Partake stuff. I have seen it in the stores. I haven't picked any of it up because frankly, most of the time I have my beers that I like, and I just buy the same basic core beers, and then I'll try new stuff here and there. But
sure.
And I'm not in the group that's really that concerned about my alcohol consumption and things like that. Although I probably should be.
Well, I mean, again, that's probably a smaller percentage of the market. There are lots of people who do enjoy both regular and non-alcoholic beer, and but even having some on hand for just like I have usually a couple of bottles of High Test in my fridge for guests, people that happen to drop by. Especially around the holidays where you might people are getting vaccinated and the holiday gatherings are a little safer now. Having a couple of cans of Partake in the fridge, you never know who's going to have one, and having that option for somebody who might be driving is always great. If like me, when it came time for me to lose weight, and I could easily do it when I was going on to was just consuming some low calorie beer like Partake, and to me, it's still one of the best tasting beers out there. No calories and low calories is just an added bonus. And they don't make enough of the fact that, to me, I don't think they really promote that. They always talk about Ted Fleming, the owner of Partake, about his colitis or his Crohn's disease that he had, the reason he started with it. It's like, well, why aren't you pushing this at athletes? Because that's so much better. That's such a good market. I mean, yes, people have health issues that they have to remove alcohol from their diet, but people who are trying to lose weight and athletes and people who are watching diabetics who are watching their sugars, all of these play into factors into a very exciting market. And so hopefully things will keep going in the right direction. again, as long as I see new beers on the shelf every week in my grocery store, I'm a happy camper.
Yep.
It makes guys like me and ladies like me, or not like me, but ladies who happen to want to they're leading a different lifestyle than they might have 20 years ago, or just adding it to their current lifestyle. And I think it's nice to have choice. It's all about choice, my friend. And
it
it's
is
good.
choice and flavor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, Sean, we have been yammering on here for about an hour. So this is the point where I say this is the end of the show.
Awesome. Well, it's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, no. So for anybody who's watched this, if you've enjoyed it, please if you're feeling generous, subscribe to my channel and click the little bell so you get notified when new videos come out. If you have any questions for me or questions for Sean, please leave them in the comments section below. If you have any suggestions for a beer style or a beer you'd like to have talked about on the show, or a possible guest you'd like me to try and get for the show, leave those comments down below. Until next time, I'm Rob from the internet. Cheers.
Salud.